So I've spent the past couple of months planning and buying components for a custom DIY 3D printer based on the Dolly printer that Tom has made. It's essentially a clone of the Prusa i3 Mark II with some various modifications and changes to make it as cheap as possible. I've not really gone for as cheap as possible. I've gone for a lot of upgrades over Tom's original Dolly concept. So it should be, in theory, a fair bit nicer, more reliable, safer, and just generally a bit nicer thing rather than a bit of plywood or OSB and some dodgy Chinese electronics. So what you see here is all of the stuff that's arrived, all the things I've ordered for this printer. I've got a couple more bits up on top of that subwoofer, but that's stuff that I already had. I already had a couple of these rolls of PLA. The purple one's actually purple glow in the dark, and then there's 500 grams each of black and green. There's also a Raspberry Pi here behind that, Pi 3, which will be controlling, running Octoprint and controlling the printer itself. And then a couple of rechargeable plug-in dehumidifiers, and the Pi is running various temperature and humidity sensors for monitoring the temperature of the printer, the enclosure once I build it, and the dry box for storing filament in once I've finished building that as well. So I just thought I would walk through all of the various bits that I've ordered here, all the bits that have arrived, just say a few words about each. So let's start on this side and work towards the other side. This is a box of cable tidy. It's this sort of cable tie where it doesn't wrap around as much as, well, it does wrap around, but it's not something you have to manually wrap all the way around the edge. It comes with a tool for just expanding it, and you can slot wires into it and then it closes up around it. It's actually quite thick. It's probably thicker than I really need it to be, so I've also got in here some other cable wrap that is that manual wrappy roundy type. But I prefer this stuff. This is actually really cheap stuff though. It's not very nice, but I've not been able to find decent quality stuff without spending an absolute fortune. These are obviously the Z-axis lead screws. I decided to go with lead screws rather than threaded rods, as they are actually better, or supposedly better anyway. Over here I've got, you can see, a whole load of various threaded rods of varying sizes, including the 5mm threaded rods that Tom used in his Dolly printer. So that's always an option if I fancy going that route instead, or if the lead screws don't work for some reason. But the lead screws should work nicely. Underneath that we have, this is YY cable. It's designed specifically for flexing in repeatedly flexing in use. It's industrial control cable essentially. It's designed for precisely this sort of application where it's going to be bending all the time while it's being used. Lesser cable would fatigue and break internally if it gets moved as much as cables do in 3D printers, especially as I'm probably going to put this in a drag chain at some point, and then it's going to have it's going to be bending a lot more than it would otherwise. This stuff, let me focus on that a bit. This is actually 7-core YY cable, 1mm cross section of copper for each of the cores, so that will let me run fewer cables between everything. It's like, I can't remember the specifics, but I worked it out and I should be able to get away with like 3 cables up to the hot end entirely, rather than having to run about a dozen, which will be nice. So there's 10 meters of that. It's overkill, but 10 meters is way overkill. But the place I got it from had a £7 delivery charge, which was fixed, so I sort of made up for the ridiculous shipping cost by buying a lot of cable. Underneath it we have, this is the same stuff, but it's 4-core, still 1mm cross section area, but it's 4 core instead of 7, and I've got 25 meters of that, which is why it's on a reel there. So that'll do me for this printer and many projects in future. But it's really good quality stuff, so that'll be nice to have. Over here, this is obviously the base of the printer, the support for the bed frame. I bought this as a frame bed support, and these rods, various smooth rods and threaded rods. In theory, actually, all the threaded rods and smooth rods that I need, making this lot up here, this 1 meter section, completely redundant. But I ordered the 1 meter rods before I'd even discovered this option, this sale on AliExpress, for I think it was about £70 or £80, which I thought was pretty reasonable. I actually ordered it in silver, but they sent it black instead, which is not quite what I wanted. So I've had to spray paint these white undercoat, and then a layer of silver, and then a layer of purple on top of that to get it into the purple that I want, which is kind of annoying. The main upright frame is currently in the kitchen drying, because I'm still in the middle of spray painting that one. So essentially it's going to be this same colour, although slightly better painted. This isn't the best quality, and see over there, it's kind of a bit messed up. But this is going to be underneath the print bed, so it's not even going to be visible. It's all a bit dodgy. I learnt a lot of lessons spraying this that I've put to good use in spraying the main frame. So the main frame should come out a lot better. Mains power strip, because I'm going to be running a Raspberry Pi and the printer at least on the in a place that's sort of a good couple of meters away from any power socket. A whole load of Ethernet cable to go from that little switch there to wherever I end up putting it in this room, and then a couple of short Ethernet cables to go from the switch to the Pi and the smoothie board clone, which I've got in another box somewhere, and then a Netgear gigabit switch, and they're like 10 quid these days, peanuts for a gigabit switch. So then we have, this is the timing belt that's used for the X and Y axes. A couple of pulleys on there. Standard AliExpress deal of getting 2 pulleys and a belt in one go. 2.75mm drill bits. I noticed that Tom used those in his clone, and they might be useful, they might not be. I didn't pay too much for them, so it's handy to have those anyway, because that's the standard size drill bit you need for drilling out M3 holes before you tap them, rather. These are obviously the spring couplers that I'm going to be using, or may use for the Z-axis. 5mm on one side for the motor end, and 8mm on that other side for the these lead screws, which I guess does actually limit me to using the lead screws rather than the 5mm threaded rods, but hey, whatever. I don't mind having loads of threaded rods and what have you left over. I'm sure they'll be useful for other projects. Here we have a box that originally contained a couple of bits that I've added to. So originally it contained this ramps board. You can kind of see that through the packaging. Let's get that out in fact. So yeah, this is a standard ramps board, nothing special there. Usual crappy polyfuses and terminals that aren't up to the task that we're asking of them. So that's all good. It did come with this nice bit of foam on the bottom though, so unlike with Tom's board, it shouldn't have bent pins everywhere. Fingers crossed. As I mentioned earlier though, I've actually got a smoothie board clone that I'm planning to be using instead. Because the ramps is pretty rubbish. This is a bag of obviously stepper motor drivers. We've got 5 Allegro drivers and 5 of the DRV 8825s or whatever they are. Because they've each got their advantages and disadvantages, and I might end up wanting to swap them around and do different things, I don't know yet. DRVs are supposedly better, but they have the issues that I've read about, so I didn't really want to rely on those. And this is a nice black PCB Arduino Mega clone, which is basically the same as any other Mega clone, but black, which I quite fancied the look of. Here we have sort of IEC sockets with built-in fuse and switch, so I don't have to hardwire a mains cable directly to the power supply, which would be nice. This will be, initially this will probably just be dangling randomly, but once I build the enclosure this will be permanently screwed into the enclosure, which would be nice. Just some cork stepper motor vibration dampeners essentially. I saw these, they looked like a good idea, they were dirt cheap. Even if they don't do very much or if they don't work, I don't care and throw them away. This is the 5V Z-axis end stop essentially, it's the bed probe 5V version, which is apparently sold by literally one AliExpress seller, which is kind of bizarre. Obviously this is the 3D printed parts, amongst other things. Yeah, these are all a nice bright green, which is exactly how I want them, right next to the purple. That'll be very nice. They're really not printed very well, to be honest. This bit, well, you can see cracks in it here. For some reason, the guy on 3D Hubs that I ordered this from printed me 2 of these. This is the X-axis motor mount, so that sits over the left-hand side for the motor. So I've actually got 2 of those, and this one's got a big split right through it there. Don't know, yeah, you should be able to see that the very top of this bit is sort of offset to the left here. It's just sort of sticking out and just completely skewed. It looks like the printer that it was printed on was just really badly tuned. It's just an absolute mess. This bit is probably the worst bit. You can see that the top there is skewed again at the top, and down here it's really warped. I'm not sure how well that's going to come across in 2D, but yeah, this is actually where it's stuck to the bed and it's just warped like hell. It's a mess. I mean, the bits are all there. I'm not convinced they're even going to screw together properly. I may end up with a printer that doesn't screw together at all, doesn't go together at all. Or I may end up with one that just about works and I'll have to completely reprint all the bits myself once I've got everything tuned in properly. It's not going to be great. I have a nice box of nozzles. These are all just random Chinese cheapies. I paid sort of 50p each for each of these, if that. And I've labelled them with the dots that E3D use for labelling their nozzles, because I do have a single E3D 0.3mm hardened steel nozzle in my E3D box down there. Here we have external MOSFET board, and look at the size of those connectors. What on earth? That is just monstrous. I mean, I know that it says that this can deliver up to 30 amps out to the heated bed, but that's just huge. I'll only ever use this if I'm using the ramps board. Really, the smoothie board clone that I've got has actually got a pretty decent connector out and pretty decent MOSFET for the heated bed, so that's not going to be an issue. But this was cheap, and I really didn't want to dare using a ramps board without an external MOSFET, because it just seems like a silly idea. Pile of thermistors that I may or may not actually use. Idler pulleys. I ordered 2, they sent me 3. Don't think I need 3, but not complaining. Little LED thing it's a 1 watt white LED that I made, and it'd be nice to stick this somewhere close to the hot end to illuminate the part as it's printed. Sort of just stick that down there, but that's for later experimentation. A meter of PTFE tubing, standard stuff. I need like 10 centimeters of it for the hot end in this printer, and I'll need a few bits for my dry box if I'm going to have my dry box, so that you can keep the filament in the dry box and print while it's still in there, which would be nice. Part cooling fan, I think this is. Yep. So yep, standard fan, 12 volt DC brushless fan. These again I probably won't use, to be honest. They're the standard RepRap cabling bundles, all nicely pre-crimped ends and everything. Yeah, as I say, I've got this other cable and I've got loads of crimps everywhere. I'll just do the cabling myself, but these are really handy to just have. It's just useful to have for my other projects. So I've got 2 of those. 4 little end stop boards, nothing special there, standard end stops. I only need 2 I think, but I bought 4 because again they were dirt cheap. Useful to have spares. Big blue tape bed covering essentially, just because. Might be handy. And that is my heated bed. 3mm thick aluminium, PCB style obviously, with all the tracks on it for actually running the heated bed. Thermistor actually is a surface mount 1206 surface mount thermistor that goes on there, and then the wires run down to the middle 2 of these 6 wires, so everything gets connected in there. It's all nice and neat, and then there's space for the usual couple of diodes in inverse parallel and the resistor for them. Other side is, you know, okay. It's not brilliant, there are a few imperfections in it, but it'll do. Just over here quickly, I've got a couple of boxes with more desiccant in. These will go in the dry box eventually, but at the moment they're just in these airtight containers to keep the moisture out of them. Then I went a bit crazy buying filament from Hobby King. I've heard that it's actually relatively decent, obviously not like premium grade, but I fancied getting a fair few different types to get me started without spending an absolute fortune. So we have, let's zoom in a bit on these. We've got colour changing ABS, purple, and then when it warms up it goes pink. White ABS, dark purple ABS, solid green ABS. In theory this is the same colour as my printed parts, maybe. Orange hips, just to be different. Translucent purple, it's just like translucent purple PLA. Nylon, I bought this primarily because you need, you kind of need nylon filament for running cables through a printer to stiffen up the cable bundles. This was before I decided to get the YY cable that will actually make it kind of redundant, but having nylon filament's kind of nice anyway. And finally we have some black hips. It's a bit of a random mix of filament, but Hobby King didn't have a lot of them in stock. A lot were out of stock, so I had to sort of get whatever they had. Random kitchen scales that were in the garage not being used. The plan is to weigh filament before I start using it, and then I can keep track of how much I've got left. And a paint scraper that again was in the garage, not being used, so I cleaned it up, and yeah, that should be nice for cleaning, for lifting prints off the bed. And now we have the E3D box. This is where we've got some nice stuff. So this is all the bits I bought from E3D. I think I spent about £200 at E3D's online store. Lots of quite fun things. So we've got a couple of glue sticks, you know, bed adhesive. They've sort of shoved everything into one bag here. So we've got a couple of springs, a nozzle wrench, one of their Hobgoblin filament gears. There we've got some bearings underneath. I think I bought 5 bearings in total. That's my hardened steel 0.3mm nozzle. And an E3D sticker and a bag of Haribo, which is nice. I got my LM8 UU bearings from E3D as well. They may well not be any better quality than the stuff from China, but they weren't that very much more expensive, so I thought I might as well go for it. Let's see what this is. Oh yes, so this is my E3D V6 hot end, official E3D stuff, rather than some China knockoff. So that's that bit. And then this is all the other bit of it, the other half of it. Heater cartridge, there's a thermistor cartridge there, fan, silicone sock, heatsink shroud, which I don't actually need. Yeah, that's all quite nice. Obviously 5 stepper motors. They're just standard stepper motors. 1.8 degree per stepper motors. But presumably because they're quite heavy, these were basically no more expensive to get from E3D than they were to get from China. And they've got it's not an actual connector here, it's just wires coming straight out, which allows you to mount these things up against other parts more closely. Be nice. And we have a decent quality power supply. Wow, so that was a nightmare to get out of the box. But yeah, it's WeHo brand? Is that how you pronounce that? I have no idea. But in theory this is much better quality than whatever random crap I can get out of China. 230 volts. It'll see 240, but it'll be okay. This is actually a 33 amp. Yeah, there we go. 12 volt, 33 amp power supply, which will be plenty. I'll need about 20 amps for the printer and the heated bed rather. But I'm planning on running a load of LED strips, RGBW LED strips, in the enclosure, as well as God knows what else. So having the extra overhead of a 33 amp power supply will be quite nice. Yeah, so that'll be nice. So because my printer frame arrived in black, and even if it had arrived in silver, like I'd asked for, it still wouldn't be the purple that I wanted. I've had to spray paint, as I said, I've had to spray paint the frame from black to white, then to silver, and then to purple. And these are the paints that I've been using to do it. I've had this white primer, which is just, yeah, white. This aluminium coat, which is just very nice silver. It's quite thick, it goes on very nicely. I initially tried this one, which is plastico to metallic, and you can tell from the lid it's sort of a slightly orangey yellow browny metallic. And then for the actual purple I've got this supposedly metallic purple. I'm not sure it says metallic anywhere, but it was supposed to be. It was again listed on Amazon as a metallic purple. But yes, it certainly comes out looking very nice purple. I'm not sure it's metallic, but it's certainly shiny and it's purple, which is good enough for me. Oh, I've got 2 cans of that because this one is definitely running out and I've only done one side of the main frame so far. And then we have these adjustable cable clips. I think you can sort of make out what they are through the bag there. So they should clip on nicely to the side of the printer frame if I decide to go down that route. These are JST SM connectors and the associated crimps, male and female. So these are, I think, 3 amp rated connectors and should fit onto my cables quite nicely. And then I can have connectors wherever I need them without using random like DuPont connectors or something with no locking on them. These have got proper locking connectors on them, which is quite nice, and they're big, they're sturdy, they're decently current rated, so that'll be nice. zip tie adhesive base things. You literally just slide a zip tie through there and it adheres onto something. Zip ties with label things on them, so I can label all the different cables that I've got flying around everywhere. And this is a big box full of all the fasteners I have, basically. I ordered fasteners from about 3 or 4 different places. About half of them came from one particular dedicated company. The rest came from various merchants on Amazon's marketplace. So this stapled together section came from one company. Lots of just nuts and bolts everywhere. More there, zip ties. I think this is a big box of nuts. It's still sealed, but it's can we sort of see in there? I think they're just big nuts. These are like massive zip tie screw down mounts. Unnecessarily large bag for a handful of screws. I don't know what they were thinking there. The other bags are perfectly sensibly sized. That one's just ridiculous. Big zip ties, in case I needed big zip ties. Various washers of varying sizes. Nuts. More nuts. Yeah, that was the company I got this lot from. Multifix. Big washers. Yeah. Washers, nuts, screws, zip ties, basically in that bag, that box, rather. Oh my god, that's heavy. Now behind this last box we have some heated bed insulation. It's literally just some cork with an adhesive, supposedly 3M adhesive on the back of that. This came with the frame and, yeah, the frame that I ordered, the frame and the rods I ordered. I added this in from the same seller on AliExpress. That should insulate the bed and stop it radiating so much heat away. And then finally we have this box. I've got a couple of these, which are anywhere from 9 to 35 volts, but that's 12 volts in my case, and then 5 volt, 5 amp out. Because as I say, I'm going to be running some 5 volt LED strips, the addressable NeoPixel types, but RGBW instead of just RGB. So I've got a couple of them. I'll only need one, but they were sold as a pack of 2 for some reason. These bench cookies, which are basically that, really. It says, does what it says on the box there. They're just rubber, and you can see I've been using them for spray painting. Supporting spray paint stuff. They're just rubberized things for sort of holding work down or supporting work on top of other things. Big tub of multi-purpose grease, lithium based apparently, so just some grease. More stuff from China, acupuncture needles for clearing out clogged nozzles. A bag of ceramic screwdrivers for adjusting the current on those tiny little stepper motor driver boards. So again, may not use those. Lots of, this is the spiral wrap cable stuff that I was talking about earlier. I'm not really very keen on it, but it does the job, I guess. And this well may end up being too small for some of my stuff, so I don't know. Then we have Kapton tape, or rather wherever it's listed. Yeah, there. Coptan tape. 12 gauge wiring for the heated bed. I think this is 3 meters of 12 gauge, 12 AWG. Yeah, it's silicon coated as well, which is nice. But that's plenty for the 10 amps or so that I'll need for the heated bed. Put that over there. This is the smoothie board clone that I'm using. MKS S-base, this is. Got the micro SD, Ethernet and USB sockets on that side. That's the input on the left there, and the heated bed output, and these are actually semi-decent connectors for that purpose. Still not totally convinced they're supposed to handle 10 amps. Yeah, okay, so the writing on the side that this camera's probably not going to focus on, that says 20 amps. I'm not convinced, but okay. It's better than these little things. So we've then got outputs for 2 heaters, a fan, 4 thermistors. That output there is for the display, which I've also got. And then 6 end stops there, and that's for the ramps style display, which I won't be using. 4 MOSFETs for controlling the 3 power outputs down there. I've all got this heatsink on it, which will help. And then we have 5 stepper motor drivers up here. These are actually the DRV825s, all with this big ass heatsink on it, which is nice. Then up there, that's just some random like GPIO type pins that you can do whatever you like with. We've got these pins here allow you to run your own stepper motors, have external stepper motor drivers on them, which is nice. I think this here, J7, which we're not focusing on. So here, J7 is the thing here is for a thermocouple, I believe. And yeah, it's just generally a nicer board than ramps. It's not as good as the official smoothie board, but that's quite a bit more expensive, and I'll probably end up getting the new smoothie board 2 when it comes out and replacing this. There you go. This is the LCD that comes with, or that I ordered along with my smoothie board clone. It's just an LCD, it's touchscreen though, and full-size SD card there and a USB socket on it as well. So that can sit somewhere more comfortable than the main board will be. That's just the USB cable that came with it. A big pack of spanners, because I don't really, surprisingly I don't actually own any spanners, and you need some for this build. This goes with that. It's just a deburring tool for removing burrs and the rounding corners of it on 3D printed models. More lube, white lithium grease, yeah, decent stuff apparently. Tiny little thermistors. One of those I'll be soldering onto my heated bed, the other one's just a spare. So yeah, here we have some ferrules and the ferrule clamp crimping tool thing, which just make wires a bit nicer for when they're going into clamps like these, where the clear screw just goes down on it. I think it's just nice to have a ferrule on the end of the wire. It just makes things a bit neater. Little tube of Loctite. This is removable type, so it won't completely lock up the printer, but it should stop it vibrating loose. Oh yes, this is some more washers, I think. Oh no, these are the nylon lock nuts. Yeah, that I had to order separately on Amazon because no one else sold them at a reasonable price. And big box of various big crimps. Especially the... do we even have any in here? I've got some upstairs, if I don't. No, this doesn't actually come with any fork crimps, which is interesting. Okay, welp. Turns out this isn't actually that useful for my purposes then. I wanted fork crimps, like these round ones, but as a fork instead of a ring, to go into the power supply and just maybe elsewhere. And I think that's it. I do have on the way some replacements for these, because from what I've read these aren't brilliant, these spring couplers. So I've got some plum couplers on the way. Hopefully they'll be here in the next week. And then that'll, in theory, give me a nicer, more stable, more rigid Z-axis.